Hearing will come to order. Welcome to the Senate Budget Committee. Today we are considering the nomination of Heather Higginbottom to be Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget. I understand Senator Kerry is coming and is on his way. We'll allow him to make remarks when he arrives. We're under very tough time constraint today because of a series of things that are happening. A hearing that's on a sensitive matter that's going on right now, and I think he may have actually going to have to leave here to go to that. There are also other negotiations that are going on this afternoon. Of course, we're going to have votes on the CR this afternoon. So it's my hope that we're able to complete work on this nomination quickly. Given the fiscal and economic challenges facing the nations, it's important that the President has his complete budget team in place. And as capable as he is, and he is capable, Director Liu needs to have a deputy director to help handle the workload and manage the day-to-day operations of the Office of Management and Budget. Ms. Higginbottom has served as Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of the Domestic Policy Council at the White House. She's previously served as Policy Director for the Obama presidential campaign and Legislative Director for Senator Kerry, among other positions, and there he is. Welcome, Senator Kerry. I think I'll suspend at that point because I know that you're expected at an important briefing as soon as you discharge your responsibilities here. So why don't you proceed, and we're delighted to have you here in the Budget Committee. Thank you, Senator Kerry. That was a ringing endorsement and I think clearly heartfelt. You have confidence in her. I know Jack Lew does because I understand that Jack Lew called me yesterday and said, this is a choice I made. Very few people I have higher regard for than Jack Lew. Jack Lew was in charge of the Office of Management and Budget the last time we balanced the budget, and not only balanced it, but quit using Social Security money to fund the general operations of the government. So he's got real credibility with me. And when he calls me and tells me that Heather Higginbottom is his choice and gives me very clear reasons as to why, I put a lot of stock in that. Obviously, I put a lot of stock when my colleague Senator Kerry, who has been a very strong ally of those who want to change fiscal course for the country, tells me that this person has served him well and he has full confidence in her ability to discharge the responsibilities of this job. That makes an impression on me because I know the good judgment that John Kerry has brought to his responsibilities here. And I think we've heard that Ms. Higginbottom brings a broad knowledge of federal policy and the operations of the government with her. I'm also pleased that she's a former member of the Senate family because my experience is that that matters in terms of responsiveness and the ability to communicate. So I look forward to hearing more from her on her background and her goals for OMB. As I've indicated, I know that Director Liu made this decision and chose this person because of the very special needs that he has in the agency. Several of our recent hearings have focused on the long-term budget crisis, so I want to begin today on a slightly different note by reviewing our current economic situation. I think it's important to remember how much the economy has improved over the last 2 years. I believe that it is clear that the federal response to the recession and the financial crisis, including actions taken by both the Bush administration and the Obama administrations, has successfully pulled the economy back from the brink. And I believe that deeply. I believe that history will record that that is indeed what has happened. Although we don't have the recovery running at the level of strength we'd like, nonetheless we see a clear turnaround. In January of 2009, the economy was losing more than 800,000 private sector jobs a month. Private sector job growth returned in March of 2010 And now we have had 12 consecutive months of growth. Just last month, the economy gained 222,000 private sector jobs. Obviously, unemployment remains too high, but the turnaround in private sector job growth we have experienced is significant. Next slide, if we can. Economic growth has also returned. In the fourth quarter of 2008, at the end of the Bush administration, the economy contracted by 6.8%. It was going full speed in reverse. Positive economic growth returned in the third quarter of 2009, and we have now 6 consecutive quarters of growth. In the fourth quarter of 2010, we saw positive growth of 2.8%. And although credit is still tight for many small businesses, the crisis in the credit markets has subsided. This chart shows what is known as the TED spread. It is essentially a measure of the risk that banks see in lending to each other. You can see at the height of the economic crisis in the fall of 2008, the TED spread went through the roof. Banks were largely unwilling to lend to each other. That spread has now returned to normal levels. In fact, at the height of the crisis, the TED spread was 9 times the normal level. In fact, it was one of the first tip-offs that we had that something very serious was occurring. We've also seen a dramatic rebound in the stock market. After falling to a low of 6,500 in March of 2009, the Dow has now risen back up to above 11,000. 2 highly respected economists, Dr. Alan Blinder and Dr. Mark Zandi, completed a study last summer that measured the impact of federal actions to shore up the economy, including both what the Federal Reserve has done as well as the fiscal policy actions taken by the Bush administration and the Obama administration. They looked at the effect of TARP and the stimulus. Here is a quote from their report. We find, referencing the actions of the federal government, that its effects on real GDP, jobs, and inflation are huge and probably averted what could have been Great Depression 2.0. When all is said and done, the financial and fiscal policies will have cost taxpayers a substantial sum, but not nearly as much as most had feared and not nearly as much as if policymakers had not acted at all. If the comprehensive policy responses saved the economy from another depression, as we estimate, they were well worth their cost. It is worth noting that this is not a partisan-driven conclusion. Dr. Zandi was an economic advisor to the McCain presidential campaign. This chart shows that Dr. Blinder and Dr. Zandi's estimate of the number of jobs we would have had without the federal response would have been substantially less. It shows we would have had 8.1 million fewer jobs in the second quarter of 2010 if we had not had the federal response, the TARP and the stimulus. In fact, they say unemployment today, absent the federal response, would be 15%. So I think it's clear that the actions taken at the end of the Bush administration and during the Obama administration played a critical role in helping to avert a financial crisis far worse than any we have seen since the Great Depression. I think those policies have been about right in the near term, and the steady economic recovery we have experienced demonstrates that. Where I've taken issue with the administration is on the longer term. I believe deeply that we must do more than what the administration has so far proposed to address the long-term fiscal challenge this country confronts. We are borrowing 40 cents of every dollar we spend. We can't do that much longer. We are headed for a circumstance in which we will be adding $1 trillion to the gross debt of this country every year for the next 10 years. That cannot be our fiscal future. That's why I believe we need a bipartisan, comprehensive debt reduction plan of the size and scope proposed by the President's own Fiscal Commission. The Fiscal Commission took a balanced approach that included every part of the federal budget: mandatory spending, domestic spending, defense spending, and yes, the revenue side. And came up with a plan to reduce the debt $4 trillion over the next 10 years.